And the point of demarcation between a telco operator's network and the end user has been rife with innovation as operators have invested heavily in NFV. This panel will discuss how telcos continue to pursue innovation at the customer edge, that via a deployment of universal CPEs or edge-based NFV infrastructures. Those are comprised of white box hardware and open source software. With us on this panel from Barcelona, Spain is Susan Johnson. She's Executive Vice President of Global Supply Chain at AT&T. Next to her is Rakesh Kumar. He's a partner at Deloitte. And on the end is Sanjay Bhatia. He's Vice President of Solutions Marketing at Ribbon Communications. And panelists, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So we're here, of course, here in Barcelona, Spain. We thank you for your time talking about, well, the title of the panel in effect is Virtual to Universal, the Evolution of the CPE with an open telco cloud architecture. Susan, I wanted to start with you. Where are we, or what is the climate right now with that adoption of virtual CPE?
Great, thanks for the question. With all this technology surrounding us at Mobile World Congress, I think it's great to always focus on the customer benefits. So with all that AT&T has going on with our journey on software-defined networking, this is actually an area where you can see tangible customer benefits. We are actually deploying a universal CPE, which is based on an open compute hardware, x86 Intel in this case. And we've got the benefit of having customers being able to support multiple virtual functions on that hardware. And we're seeing really good adoption, maybe in two different categories. One, we're seeing customers that are taking more of a tactical approach. They're reaching end of life on their CPE, so they are upgrading. But we're seeing a lot of customers take this on as a big transformation of their overall IT infrastructure. They've got the capability to swap out that proprietary integrated CPE and move to something that allows them the more flexibility to upgrade over time, support their growth with VNFs, and have a lot more flexibility. So we have about 7,000 customers on this today. And we're seeing good adoption with some big names of customers that you would recognize, Omnicom Group, IBM. So we feel good about customer feedback on this. Good adoption across sort of the virtual routing side as well as the security side and WAN acceleration. So overall, we're pretty excited about this.
Rakesh, from a system integrator point of view, from your perspective, how do you see the adoption of virtual CPE?
I think it's a journey, obviously, and we have come a long way in the last couple of years. Most carriers obviously are in the game now, and I think big part of this thing is as they virtualize their entire core and the central office and so on, that really enables them to deliver services a lot more seamless if there is adoption of UCP, VCP at the edge, customer edge, right? And so I think we are seeing progress on both sides. Obviously, carriers had focused a lot more on the core side first, but without having proper virtualization at the customer edge, you cannot have much control and management what you want to deliver to the customer. And so with the progress that AT&T and Verizon are making, we will start to see a lot more newer applications coming in the marketplace, where people would see network slicing, a lot more QoS control end-to-end, and therefore adoption of things like connected car and sort of operations in hospitals and so on, you can manage remotely. So I think all of that, there are lots of new services that will be enabled through this this virtualization that's happening on the edge. And again, it's a journey. I think it will take a few years, but we're on the right path.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I concur with both my fellow panelists here. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Sanjay from Ribbon Communications, and actually, we just announced 2 weeks ago a major VCPE application deployment at a major service provider in the US. So we are seeing this similar kind of traction in the marketplace in terms of the service providers seeing a lot of benefits, as well as the enterprises willing to accept those cloud-based models in terms of VCPE and UCPE and the provision of firewall and security, and in our case SBCs or session border controllers on the premise. in a virtualized manner. So we clearly are seeing a lot of interest from a lot of service providers globally in this front.
So I want to get some of the benefits from you, Sanjay, in a moment to CPE technologies as a whole, but I want to go back to Rakesh. If you can just sort of define for us maybe the difference or even the similarities between virtual and universal CPE.
Sure. And I think it's, again, its definitions are changing continuously as well. But in its purest form, virtual CPE and UCPE, they both use VNFs to deliver premise-based gateway services, routing or firewalls or encryption, session border control, and so on. The main difference is in case of virtual CPE, all of the VNFs, they reside in the cloud, in the central cloud, or in the telco's network. Whereas in case of UCPE, almost all of them reside in on-premise hardware. And therefore, you need lot higher optimized, high-performance hardware in case of UCPE. They both use x86, and certainly they are moving towards that. Some of them use some ASICs as well, but for most part, they are moving towards commodity hardware and x86 processors. But given what you are able to do with UCP at the premise, the hardwares are more optimized, they're higher performance. Now, what's happening is, even though it's higher performance and optimized, they still have limited capacity. And so, for example, today, for most part, you can have 4 virtual machines on a UCP maximum. Now, when you start to have you want a lot more VNFs on your, for your CPE, that's not enough. And so what's happening is there's a hybrid model evolving, and whereby some of the VNFs are sitting on-premise, on UCP, I suppose you can call it, and some of them are sitting in the cloud, and which is VCP. And that's becoming the most popular mode as we move forward. I think over time, if you think from a carrier perspective, VNFs sitting in the cloud, if that allows them a lot more control, a lot more management, and they can provide services a lot more seamlessly. But the problem is, today, given the bandwidth limitations sometimes, and the amount of latency that's there between cloud and premise, and perhaps even on the network side, the network of the carriers, they have not evolved to 100% virtualized solution. And so there are a specialization that's required in CPE to enable evolution of the network. So for all of those regions, I think again it's a process. So today, VCP does not allow enough, sort of enough control to the carriers from the cloud. Therefore, they move to UCP. But over time, I think we'll continue to see migration from UCP to VCP, or at least we will start to see the boxes at the premise, they are completely commodity x86 boxes, and that's the direction we're looking at.
Yeah, and I would just add on that. I think what we're finding is customers, based on sort of their layout of office, branch offices being a great opportunity for universal CPE, and the latency requirements of different things they're looking at, kind of making different decisions just based on their unique circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, the deployments that we announced, right, they're starting, that particular service provider is starting with VCPE, but moving to UCPE. So it's pretty much, I think, both options are on the table, and there's pros and cons depending on the customer's environments and their preferences as to which one they prefer. So I think and then the points he made regarding the end-to-end being virtualized as well is important. So I think it's just a matter of what's your customer base, what are they expecting out of a given solution, and I think both options are viable.
So with that said, you have virtual VCPE, UCPE, but from an enterprise point of view, what are the benefits? And from a customer point of view, what are those benefits? Susan, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Can you just give us maybe 2 of the primary benefits of either one?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think first of all, it's flexibility. And so it used to be if you wanted to add a firewall or add a WAN accelerator, it was a swap out of a piece of equipment at a customer premise. Today, with the standardization of the open compute x86s we're talking about here, customer can effectively, to push of a button, be spinning up new VNFs, and they can be reconfiguring what they need as their business grows and changes. So I would say it's flexibility. I think it's also simplicity. Rather than supporting different environments, you can have it sort of supported and integrated and managed by one provider. So we're seeing those are the two primary benefits, and of course it's decreasing the CPE footprint, which has got a lot of benefits for the customer as they continue to grow with flexibility.
Enterprise?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so the enterprise, the benefits of UCP are, they're used to this demarc point that the service provider puts in there, and that's the current model that they're used to. So clearly, it's a natural migration to a UCPE type of environment. Then, of course, the point Susan made regarding flexibility, as well as the key point here, I think, is that single button push, right? It's the self-service aspects, the ability for the enterprise to quickly get on demand the service that they need. And without the service provider having to do truck rolls and that kind of stuff. So that's really at the heart of it. It's about the automation, the productivity, and the ability to do this very easily with software.
It's actually fun to watch customers because they're so used to sort of the CPE change out, but we all talk about the virtualization of functions. You can actually see the customer's eyes light up, you push a button, and effectively you're spinning up a new VNF. It sort of brings to life, I think, for the customer what this journey looks like and the movement to virtualized functions.
I want to get a little bit into orchestration. Rakesh, I'll start with you. Can you have an end-to-end delivery of cloud services without a centralized orchestration?
I guess in theory you can, but on a very limited scale. And I think you can have, when you're starting with VNFs, when you're just starting deployment of VNF and you're at early stage, I think you can do that. But it's not a scalable solution. Because every time you change a VNF or you want to resequence or regroup the VNF for improving the services and so on, if you don't have central orchestration engine, you have to program end to end. So you can do it, but obviously if you are trying to scale your services and you want to sell to multiple customers in different environments, that level of end-to-end chaining through program is not a scalable solution. But that said, majority of the implementation that you see today, they are using a mix of central orchestration tool as well as the programming tools. And so things like Puppet or Chef, they are some of the tools that carriers are using, and Yaman is the language they use to make sure they can pre-configure the services and scenarios in advance of rolling those out. And so as customers order, in some cases, so that's one way you can handle that. But again, that's not a scalable. As carriers continue to evolve virtualization in their network, you should see more and more centralized orchestration tool being able to enable on an end-to-end basis. And so that's the way I see sort of right now. You can always go manual, but that's obviously manual orchestration, but that's not a scalable solution.
No.
It's expensive, it takes too long, time to service is very long, so you can't do that.
Susan, of course, AT&T, a big push or a big proponent of centralizing cloud orchestration. One of those initiatives is ONAP. Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, we started our kind of software-defined networking journey over 4 years ago and took a long look around to say, how are we going to manage the orchestration of this, and how do we get the flexibility and the scalability we need out of that orchestration? And we came to the conclusion that there was nothing out there that was going to meet AT&T's needs. So I think as a reflection of how AT&T is evolving and the industry is evolving, we started developing our own code. And it started out as an internal AT&T eComp. We turned that out to open source, now called ONAP, just to use a lot of acronyms. And we've turned it out into open source, and we decided very quickly, though, that we wanted it to be an open source because we wanted to bring along the overall ecosystem and the overall community. to sort of bring people along on the journey and to get other contributors. So we have now reached the point where we've got a lot of different other service providers and a lot of the bigger ecosystem contributing code to ONAP, and we're really happy about the development there. IBM, Orange, China Mobile. I mean, there's a long list of mobile service providers that have now signed up for ONAP. The good thing about that is we are all collaborating together on the development and feature functionality of that going forward. And it is bringing down the cost for the overall industry to be able to share the development of that and to have the best eyes looking at that code so that we are all working together as an ecosystem. So it's also helped us to move the entire industry forward on the NFV journey in a really interesting way that's driving a lot more collaboration, and I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I mean, as a vendor, clearly, you know, open software and open source is important. So ONAP is a key initiative that AT&T, you know, initiated and launched, and it's spreading now, right? So we're pretty much a part of it and helping move the ecosystem along. So absolutely, I think it's extremely important.
Sanjay, I want to move to microservices and how vendors and carriers as well are enabling the delivery of microservices. From Ribbon's point of view, what's your stake? What's your position there?
No, that's critical. I mean, what microservices are basically the key architecture and building blocks for any virtual network function or VNF, and it's important because it enables flexibility and the ability for the end user, in this case the enterprise, to be able to consume those services, and the service provider being able to launch new services quickly in terms of microservices and offer those services. So microservices architectures are key, very important, and our virtual network functions, the many that we provide, clearly do support cloud native and microservices based architecture. So it's extremely critical, and that's when you're really talking about true cloud, right?
Just to add one quick point, so microservices, they were primarily on the IT side for the last few years, but finally I think it's migrating towards a lot more on the network side, and including AT&T. I mean, there are big plans to use microservices to enable the network virtualization. And so, I think overall microservices is a lot more efficient and a lot more flexible, especially when you think of delivering VNFs on the CPEs, on UCPEs. It's a lot more efficient from that perspective. So by you delivering VNFs on UCP based on microservices, because it's not virtual machine based, it's contained and you can virtualize the OS itself, so it's a lot more efficient. And therefore, that allows for delivery of a lot more VNF, by the way, to UCPs. And by doing so, carriers have a lot more control on an end-to-end basis. And that then allows them to deliver a lot more interesting services, doing network slicing and doing all kinds of advanced services on top of that. And so we'll start to see wave of those services because of use of microservices in the virtualization process.
Rakesh mentioned VNF, Susan. Open source software running on white box hardware, does that support the development of VNF or the VNF ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it gets back to the basics of where we're heading with software-defined networking. First of all, trying to get to standardized hardware wherever possible, and trying to figure out how we then have the virtualization of functions sitting on top of it. So what it does is it gives us the flexibility to drive white box further out into the network and to continue to virtualize the functions sitting on top of it, which gives us continued more flexibility going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, open source is critical. It helps the ecosystem. Virtual network functions won't be open source anytime soon, right? Because that's where the service provider actually gets their differentiation of the offer. So, but underlying on the orchestration side, on the virtualization infrastructure side, it's clearly very important. And we are, from a vendor perspective, we're all on board in terms of support for initiatives like ONAP and others, right?
I wanted to wrap with a futurist question. Rakesh, I'll start with you. If we were here this time next year talking about virtual CPE, universal CPE, or the relationship between the two, what do you think we would be talking about?
I think obviously CPE is one part of the equation, and there's a lot of progress being made. I think we'll start to, there is the orchestration piece we talked about, and then there's a network core, the central office and the network core. All of these things need to come together in terms of next generation capabilities to really drive seamless service on an end-to-end basis, to deliver a lot more control and management to the carriers from an end-to-end perspective, and be able to deliver new sets of services. So I'll just talk briefly on the core side. Most of the network is not virtualized today, maybe 10%, maybe 5% in many cases. And so, so that's the reality. And so you will start to see, we'll see a lot more progress by next year in that space. And there are programs like CORD program, or for example, OLTs are being virtualized as VOLT and so on. That virtualization in the central office, moving from 4 ESS, 5 ESS, DAX infrastructure to server-based virtualized cloud infrastructure is a big push. And that's really important, along with the CPE and orchestration. And I think we'll talk a lot more about that as well next year.
So I, of course, have to correct you on your
Sure.
details, because we're farther along on that.
Yeah. I said overall.
So you know, because we publicly announced it, we had about 55% of our network functions virtualized last year, and we're headed for 75% this year. So I think what we'll be talking about next year is we kind of feel like we're hitting the tipping point. And then it is going to be about seeing even more of the benefits of that journey that we're on, and getting more of the savings, the flexibility, and the speed of innovation, because that is really what it's about. How do we innovate faster for the customer, put the innovation in the software? We all know how quickly software can turn, versus sort of the transition and long roadmap and inflexibility of some of the hardware. So I'm excited about the innovation you're going to see in the industry going forward as we continue the journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'm with Susan on this one, right? I mean, just looking back 4 or 5 years, I mean, we were just talking about all of these things. Now look at where we are, right? We have a major service provider here, and we're talking deployments, right? So we've come a long way, and we're making things happen, right, in terms of NFV and deployments of applications such as VCPE, UCPE. So moving forward, and our experience on the core and the edge has been we're virtualizing. We've got global service providers taking our solution sets, right, and deploying. So I think that momentum is picking up, and as Susan said, right, it's an inflection point. So I think next year you're going to just hear more and more about this.
And once again, from the NMG studio right here in Barcelona, Spain, we'd like to thank our speakers. And for more information on how to be on our program in 2018, you can contact us at thenetworkmediagroup.com. So long.